Get those crystal balls back out, baby. It is time for some second half predictions. These are serious predictions, guys. They're not going to be bold. They're not going to be crazy. We're going to take this as serious as we possibly can on a normal Friday. No freakiness involved whatsoever on the podcast daily. That's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We will still have our Future Fans Friday guest picker involved in this show, but we got to look ahead at what's going to happen for the 5-1 Buckeyes. They get back in 8 days against Nebraska. Then they have the big one at Penn State. Go big picture. Let's start with this, Bill. Just a simple question. Okay. Is Ohio State going to make the Big Ten championship game?
Yes. I do think Ohio State will make the Big Ten championship game. I guess there's some potential trickiness depending on how many one-loss teams there are, right? And I haven't quite figured out exactly what that might look like. Like if it's Penn State and Ohio State, or I think Ohio State will have the head-to-head, so that won't matter. And I guess it's Indiana.
Yeah, it's the possibility of multiple teams being involved. Like somebody asked on subtext, like, why did I say that Ohio State doesn't control its own destiny? If it wins out, it's in. And when you add in teams like, Wisconsin, who they don't play, like you could get some weird wonkiness. Illinois, I don't know how those tiebreakers would play out, but when there are teams that Ohio State doesn't play, that's when it feels like it gets out of their hand at this point. There could be a time in like 4 weeks where their destiny is in their hands if they continue to win out. But right now, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, there's a couple. So like Indiana wouldn't be a factor because I guess Ohio State will have that head-to-head. Same with Penn State.
Yeah. Same with Nebraska.
Nebraska would have 2 losses.
Same
Iowa, Michigan. So it's really like, if Wisconsin somehow navigates this with only 1 Big Ten loss and Illinois, are the 2. And I haven't looked at either of their schedules to know. Ohio State, having played Oregon, Indiana, Penn State, Iowa, like I think if it comes down to winning percentage of your conference opponents, Ohio State will be fine. So I'll say like that's a long way for me to get to yes. Okay. I think Ohio State will play in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I don't think you can look at the rest of the conference and expect any of those teams to finish it with just 1 loss. So I really think it's an Ohio State, Penn State conversation. Indiana's been good. I'm not suggesting they haven't. I still don't think they'll beat Michigan. I still don't think they'll beat Ohio State. Like I don't think that's a real concern.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that part in because we were asked about that a couple of times, and that situation could change. And if Ohio State does win out, like it seems pretty unlikely that there'd be a doomsday scenario that kept them out of going from Indianapolis. So, Berm, do you think they will be there?
Yeah. I mean, as I said on the Rooster show earlier this week, I know people are going to look at this game against Oregon that just happened and try to extrapolate it out and how Ryan Day fares in top 5 games and Penn State's better than they've been and blah. And maybe this is me channeling my inner Austin Ward. Like I don't see anything on the Penn State offense that is anywhere near as scary as what Oregon has to muster up. And yes, they're going to do a lot of things. They got a lot of eye candy. They got a lot of motion. They got a lot. I just don't think athletically their offense can do to Ohio State what Oregon did. And unless you have a team that has those types of dudes on it, I don't think Ohio State's defense, as much as we have questions about it now that we didn't have heading into the season, I still don't think that they are going to be out athleted by Penn State. And that's the way you beat Ohio State. And so I think that game will be a very normal Ohio State Penn State game, probably a 27-17, 27-20 type game. But like,
what does a normal Ohio State Penn State game look like?
I've never seen one of those.
The craziest version of football that you can concoct.
Yeah, I mean it's ugly, it's sloppy for both teams. It's going to come down to a couple play. I just don't think that Penn State has the game breakers on offense to do what you have to do to beat Ohio State. So I think yes, Ohio State still makes the Big Ten championship game, and we'll see what happens. I think the Oregon matchup is a very like styles make fights, and Oregon is not the type of team Ohio State wants to play again. I will tell you that. I mean, they want to play them again just to get that taste out of their mouth. But like, if I was designing a path to a national championship for Ohio State, it would not involve playing the Oregon Ducks.
Maybe we're going to lose to Purdue this week, and won't be there.
Hey, man, you don't just walk into Ross-Ade Stadium on a Friday night after a physical game against Ohio State and roll, I guess. But they probably will roll.
Well, I'm told that it's difficult to travel across multiple time zones and win a game on the road. I mean, Seems like that's true. It's playing itself out.
Penn State
impossible. It's an impossible task.
It seems like it's only possible to do if you're going to Los Angeles. So
it's only when USC is involved does it actually get a little difficult, a little challenging. I think.
I
UFT
did mention
and UCLA are the only ones that have fallen prey. So
I did mention that early on with like Oregon's schedule. It's like, how did you draw that misfortune? That not only is it a Friday night road game, but it's at Purdue. Like you're going into the gray sky vortex and multiple time zones that you got to cover. That's not going to be fun for them. I do think that Ohio State will still make the Big Ten championship game as well, just to complete the trifecta there. It does all come down to that Penn State matchup because athlete for athlete, as Berm was describing there, Penn State is the closest of anybody else in the league to Ohio State. And it's going to be a big challenge in the trenches. It always is, but especially now as we look into the second half of the year and not having Josh Simmons out there, I think it was hard for me to consider like a real pathway for Penn State to win with what I view as their offensive limitations. But now if there are ways to attack Ohio State and to keep, them from pressuring you and let it Drew Auer throw, and their defensive front gets to work against a line that I don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to have to wait and see against Nebraska, whether that's in Mahalski or, if they move any other pieces with Tegra Shabola and Austin Sierreveld. Like, I really don't know what that solution looks like. That's now where Penn State can make that a much more challenging game. And it gives me some second thoughts, a little bit of pause. And then I go back to the things that I always lean on for those games, which is James Franklin being on the other sideline and doubts about Penn State's quarterback play. So I still think Ohio State should win that game. And there's not a scenario yet where I really think that Indiana becomes a team that can beat Ohio State. I don't think there's any reason to be concerned about this version of Michigan. I am skeptical still about taking Dylan Raiola on the road as a freshman and some of the mistakes that he's made, even if Nebraska's defense is better. Penn State is the only game that I think Ohio State could lose, and I don't think that they will.
I think I go back to like 2016 and that Penn State game, Ohio State was not without their starting tackle, but Isaiah Prince was the starting tackle, and the Buckeyes gave up 6 sacks.
It might have been better suited just not playing everybody.
No, like Penn State had 6 sacks, and that game still came down to them needing a blocked field goal return for a touchdown to win. So I think there's ways to mitigate the loss of Josh Simmons, as we talked about earlier in the week. And yeah, Abdul Carter's really good, and yeah, Danny Denai Sutton is really good, but like, I don't know that the rest of what Penn State offers defensively is better than it's been in the last few years. And I don't know that their offense, as improved as it is, because it is much more versatile and much more confusing than it's been. I think that the problems they have offensively and limitations are still the same. Like I don't see game breakers on their offense.
Yeah, they don't have the receivers still. Tyler Warren might be the best tight end in the country, but
yeah, he's really good.
Their receivers are what they've been the last few years. I think I agree with that. Yeah.
So is
the
rest
full
of the
Penn State game
show?
preview? Yeah.
No, we're not ready for that. Second half as a whole, so we've come to terms with the fact that Josh Simmons may have been the one player that Ohio State couldn't afford to lose, and we're not really sure how they're going to replace him. Who now is the one player that Ohio State could least afford to lose in the second half? In other words, who is the most valuable player on this team as they try and get? Are you
really wanting us to put this out in the atmosphere?
I'm shifting it to most valuable.
It's Will Howard.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean,
without question.
Without question, it is not to be a knock on any other quarterbacks, but he clearly has a better command of the offense and a better touch and better feel for while the game is happening than anyone else. And so I just don't think it's even close. Yeah, I mean, Caleb Downs would be pretty close, I guess, but like,
I feel like it's Caleb Downs because I think there would be other ways for Ohio State to score offensively, and that this is not meant to diminish Will Howard at all. I think that if you
are you diminishing Will Howard? I'm
not doing that. I'm saying if you put Devin Brown in the game, or if you built a package for Julian Sayin or Lincoln Keenholz with the other skill players that Ohio State has at its disposal, I think that they would still be able to score points. With some of the new questions that we have about the silver bullets coming out of the game in Oregon, I think if you removed Caleb Downs for this team, the defense would disintegrate. Like, that's how important he is.
I don't like hypothetical conversations about not having players in the lineup.
Yeah, this seems really risky to me. It feels like we're walking a very delicate line here.
I like couching it more as most valuable, as Austin said. I'll just to throw out somebody different. I think maybe I'd say Seth McLaughlin, because his job of keeping this offensive line together just got a whole lot more challenging. Making calls, identifying things. I think one of the things he's done this year is, and maybe it's not noticeable, but I feel like I picked up on some people saying it, is like helping whoever it is like get over an in-game struggle rather quickly. And I think I'll have to do some of that too, no matter who the new left tackle is. So, and like he and Will Howard are going to have to be even more on point with protections and stuff than they have been previously, because whoever's at left tackle just isn't going to have the eyes or the experience, I think, to help you out there very much. So I think he's been really important for them all year. I just think he becomes more important for them. I think he's played well. I know, like, again, like his PFF grades or whatever from the Oregon game weren't great. I don't know that I thought he had a bad game. I think he's been pretty consistently good for Ohio State and been one of the better centers, I think, in college football this year. And it's been a really good story. But it's also, I think, just going to get a little more difficult for him now. Just and not because the competition's ratcheting up or whatever, and he can't handle it. It's just going to be like more of the sort of like the ancillary stuff on his plate now that you don't have a veteran, experienced player like Josh Simmons out there on the offensive line.
Now, let me take this question and flip it, smack it up, flip it, rub it down. I'm sorry, forgot. This is not Freaky Friday.
This is not Freaky Friday, Berm. I'm
Serious
sorry.
Friday. Let me pose it to you guys this way. You just asked who the most valuable player is for the Ohio State football team from here to the end of the season. I picked Will Howard. You picked Caleb Downs, Austin, and Bill, you picked Seth McLaughlin. 3 guys who weren't on this team a year ago for a team that returned a bunch of dudes who were celebrated for their decision to return. And we're at a point midway through the season where none of those guys, with the exception maybe of Emeka Ibuka, and Travion Henderson. So I don't want to. It seems like there's been a lot of people not like living up to the expectation. If we're all picking guys who weren't on this team a year ago, or is that indicative of the fact that there was just glaring holes on this team that they couldn't have fixed otherwise?
It could be both. I think guys like, especially Will and Seth, who like this is their last go around. They came to Ohio State to end their careers on a better note than maybe it otherwise would have ended. I do feel like they are playing with an urgency that reflects that. And maybe some of the guys who came back aren't. Like, I don't know. That feels like a fair criticism. And they're adults. They've been around for a while. They played a lot of football. I'm not saying they're like loafing it or that they don't care. I think they all do care. But I think everyone was expecting more from that group than we've gotten so far, right? And it's mostly like the group of the like veteran defenders. Like I think you're right. Then I would not lump Emeka Ibuka in that. He's played awesome. I think Travion Henderson played really well. Just think some of the defensive guys who I think have been like were the most vocal about coming back and like what it means and what they were going to do this year. Like they didn't back it up in the biggest game of the year so far. It doesn't mean they won't moving forward, but yeah, I think
what bothers me about it,
talking about transfers.
What bothers me the most about it is, since this is a serious Friday, it's not that there's a lack of productivity. It's that there is a lack of passion and fire. And again, I want to be clear that I'm not going to lump everyone into this conversation, because we've certainly seen it out of Cody Simon, have consistently seen it out of Jack Sawyer. It's the rest of the group, I think, that sometimes is like just too cool for school, and it's frustrating when you see it on the field, I guess. Like a Saturday at Oregon, pregame, it was Jack Sawyer in the middle of that Ohio State huddle saying, let's like, I can't repeat the things that he's saying, obviously, but like, it's not everyone, but it does feel like there's some guys who are missing an opportunity to cement a legacy that they apparently came back to cement, and I don't know that it's happening. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think Emeka and Travion certainly belong in that conversation that you mentioned there with, Cody Simon, guys that I don't think you can question the leadership or how important it is to them. But when we spent the entire offseason saying, well, they've not accomplished anything, that hunger should be there, should be no complacency. We know how much work goes into playing at Ohio State, and you can't not loaf your way through off-season workouts, training camp, games, and survive. But I think we all thought there would be a little bit more. And the part that you're mentioning there, Berm, is that Will Howard came into the post-game 10 in Oregon and he said, man, I hope this lights a fire under us. Like what? How, shouldn't it have? I don't understand. Was it not there before? For everybody? How can that possibly be that the rest of these veterans on this team have lived through multiple Michigan losses, don't have gold pants, have not won a national championship, and have not won a Big Ten championship? What more fire could they possibly need? That's nuts to me.
I agree.
Players generally take on the attitude of their in-unit leader, correct? So I think that there has to be an accounting and a question to be asked of the defensive coaches who are in these positions. Is Larry Johnson demanding enough from his guys? Is Matt Guerrieri? I mean, I'm not going to knock the way Lathan Ransom or Caleb Downs has played, but I mean, Lathan Ransom played probably his worst game of the season against Oregon, which is the lack of tackling, et cetera. And certainly the corners played their worst game of the year against Oregon. So we have to be fair and say, hey, to everyone, are you demanding enough from your guys? Are you willing to make an uncomfortable decision? Like we saw Tim Walton, who has been received nothing but praise for the last 2 years. It's 5 days after the game now, 6 days after the game. I don't understand how Jermaine Matthews doesn't go in that game, at least for a series to settle down Denzel Burke. So, I get, Tim Walton played at Ohio State. He's a guy who's dealt with the biggest of the personalities at the cornerback position in the world of sports. But I do think that there's a moment where you have a responsibility as a coach to say, you're not doing the job right now, and I need you off the field. And I don't see that. And that's puzzling. So where I'm not demanding a guy be benched, but I am saying at some point, if your job is single-handedly costing your team points and it happens over and over and over again, I don't know how as a coach you don't pull that guy off the field and say, sorry, we need to give you a few minutes to catch your breath. Well, whatever.
Can that be a question here then? Like along the Jermaine Matthews train of thought, are there guys who have not played a ton to date who we think might play bigger roles on this team in the second half of the season, whether it's Jermaine or somebody else?
It is a great question, and we're going to get to it after we take a quick break for Future Fan Sports. As promised, Future Fan Sports Ace Predictor Liberty is back this week as we look ahead to the second half of the season. Your prediction for Oregon, none of mine did. I wasn't even close. You predicted a shootout, but you had Ohio State winning, and it came
I
up
got 59 against 39, but that wasn't even close.
Didn't come through, and Ohio State lost. But
yes,
it looked like, based on the pictures I saw, that Future Fan Sports has helped you enjoy Ohio State games even more.
Yes, it was very much because it was very fun when I watched it with my family, and I was very into the game, and I was like, let's go Buckeyes.
That's right. And we got one more week until they're back at it. So we're looking ahead to the second half of the season. But, Liberty has been using this. We've been learning together, finding out all about the rules. It's interactive. It's unique. It's a storybook-led activity box.
And if you forgot, I'm his daughter, which is why I'm here.
That's true.
I'm not just some random kid that's here to do it.
That's true. She's not just a random kid, but she has been using Future Fan Sports. It's $49.99 at futurefans.com/OSU. Yes.
I've had very fun times doing it with you reading the book and Mom, and I've had very fun times with the surprises.
That's great. You can get it at Learning Express toy stores in UA, Worthington and New Albany. That's futurefans.com/OSU. And your prediction for the second half, the big question that we've been asking on Bold Predictions.
Is I think
Okay, just go right for it.
I think that they are going to make it to the Big Ten game.
Big
And
Ten championship game.
Yeah, and I think for the second half, the most important person is going to be Will Howard. Back to you, Austin Ward.
Okay, well, there we go. Will Howard and the Buckeyes going to the Big Ten championship game. Now back to Bill Landis. All right, thanks to Liberty for a little bit of optimism and a little bit of silliness on a Friday. Now we're going to get back to this very business-like episode of the podcast daily with uber serious predictions. Bill wants to take it down the road of guys who might emerge in the second half. Did you have someone who was already in mind, Bill?
I think Jermaine Matthews is the most obvious one, but just for the sake of picking somebody different, like I wonder maybe about like Edric Houston as a true freshman defensive end. Like
that's the one.
I just think everything needs to be on the table for Ohio State to start hitting the quarterback and not merely having a nice pressure rate that's good to look at kind of thing. And like it could be Caden Curry playing more snaps, it could be Mitchell Melton playing more snaps. I think when Edric Houston is out there, he plays with pretty good energy. And maybe that's just because he's young and he's excited to be out there. But I think Ohio State could use a little bit of an infusion of that. So like I'm not saying like bench Jack and JT and play different guys necessarily, but I think you could be a little more expansive with that defensive end rotation just to try to find some different looks and different skill sets and body types and ways of playing the position to throw at teams. So Edric Houston, when I think about that, I think Edric Houston's like first guy that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and I understand the challenge for Ohio State in this decision making process because again, Jack and JT do one thing very, very well. They play the run very well, and that is responsibility number one, goal number one for the defense. And on Saturday against Oregon, when those guys came off the field, you saw Oregon always take advantage of it and run right where they were. So like I get that but at some point, you just have to let these guys play and see if they can do it. I don't know that there's really any other discussion. If you're putting Mitchell Melton out there and Caden Curry out there and Kenyatta Jackson out there, try Edric Houston out there. See what happens. I mean, it can't be worse. It can't be worse than 3rd and 9 and Oregon running the ball for 14 yards. Like it can't be worse. So you owe it to those guys, especially when you're talking about 5-star recruits from Georgia who come up here and had the decision to make between Ohio State and Alabama and all these other schools. Like you have to give him a chance to play. And I can't see an argument otherwise at this point.
Yeah. And I think Caden McDonald goes in that situation as well. Mentioned him on Wednesday in the stock watch. Like when Tyleik Williams is healthy and when Ty Hamilton is playing that complementary role with him, those guys play at a very high level, and it's difficult to run the football up the middle against Ohio State, and they're able to collapse the pocket and seemingly put the ends in better position to make some plays. But, I think some of the effectiveness waned because they again got into the, 50, 55-ish snap count range again, and somebody else needs to help step up in that situation. And it feels like Ohio State's been grasping around it, and like, they tried Hero Canoe. They went into the first week without Tyleik Williams, and they started Tywone Malone. Like Caden McDonald's effectiveness when he gets on the field seems apparent to me. It seems apparent to the people that are doing some of the grading. I'm not sure where the hesitancy comes from to let him actually go out there and do it more. Like, I think the three of us can all agree that the changes that have to be made for this defense to get where it needs to go need to come from the defensive line. And I just don't believe that they are short of options or talent to get that accomplished. So that's the part that's been dumbfounding to me. But again, I'm not an expert.
I don't say that to say that Larry Johnson is not doing his job. I'm saying that in any defense, when things are going inexplicably wrong or aren't being as effective as they could be or should be based on what we've heard for the last year and what all that was returned, it always starts up front. Like that is the default position. So if you're not getting pressure on the quarterback, everything else is messed up, and they're not getting pressure on the quarterback for whatever reason. And I'm not saying sacks, whatever. Dylan Gabriel didn't get hit, I don't think, on Saturday. So I just think that there's some disconnect there, and you just have to try different rotations. You have to try different guys in different spots. And if I could move it to the offensive side of the ball for the same conversation, again, not to keep bringing up shows earlier in the week, but at Roosters, I said, you're going to find out in this off week and leading up into the Nebraska game, like, what is Jelani Thurman? What does he want to be? And like, I understand you have Bennett Christian, who you trust as a blocker, but if you don't see him as a potential game-changing option at tight end, then you do see that the long-term upside potential high ceiling for Jelani Thurman is there, then you have to see if Jelani Thurman can do it. And, he's only in his second year. I understand that the clock isn't the same for everyone, but like you're not going to get 4 years out of Jelani Thurman. So like, now is the time to figure it out.
Yeah. And that offensive spot also, I mean, we don't know what the decision is going to be at left tackle, but when we're talking about Bill, somebody who has to step up in the second half of the year, you would assume that that's going to come from Zin Mahalski, George Fitzpatrick, Tegra Shabola, Austin Sareveld, potentially Donovan Jackson. That feels like the least likely option at left tackle specifically, but like someone in that group is going to, if this team is going to do what it says we think it should and get back to the Big Ten championship game, then someone's going to have to emerge at left tackle.
Yeah, no doubt. I still don't know. I really don't feel like I have any feel for who it's going to be at this point. Like there's like 6 potential pathways I think Ohio State could go down. I think I saw some stuff. I actually asked you guys because you were there. I saw some stuff, people talking about like when the injury initially happened, it looked like Donovan might go to tackle, and I don't know if it was maybe Montgomery came onto the field to play guard, and then they switched that out and brought Zen out. Is that right? Did you guys get eyeballs on that?
I didn't see it. No.
That did not look to me like what was transpiring. I think
if that did happen, I wonder if it's because Tegra wasn't available.
Yeah, I think they were still dealing with the Tegra situation. I did not see them go line up and get that far. I thought it was more like a possibility that Austin Sareveld could be going out to left tackle. They were scrambling around a little bit. I'm not going to question what anybody else saw. I did not think, from my view in the press box up high, that Luke Montgomery was going into the game.
Okay. Do we think he is at all an option at tackle, or no? We think he'd be down the list behind like Austin, Tegra, Zen, and George?
I think. Can both those things be true?
What was the last thing he said during camp when we talked to him? Like that he wasn't working at tackle, didn't think that it was going to be tackle anymore. I can't.
Yeah, I think it was that he wasn't doing much of that. Like he was pretty focused on the interior positions. Like he has tackle snaps in games from last year, in like backup roles, but I think like once we got to August, I don't really think he was doing any tackle stuff. Even when they were shuffling guys around, and like that's when Austin Sareveld kicked out the tackle. I'm pretty sure Luke still stayed on the inside.
Yeah, that's what I thought he said. I couldn't remember for sure because that was coming up with like, oh well, maybe he's kicking all the way to the middle and he's going to be a center to live up to Berm's prophecy. But it doesn't feel like tackle is really in the cards for him right now. And I think looking at him, I'm not sure that it suit in his physical development. I'm not sure that he would be ready to do that right now.
Yeah, I don't know that either. We want to give a guess on who the left tackle will be against Nebraska.
Zen Mahalski. That's my guess. Okay. And and it's not because he played a perfect game against Oregon when he came in, but like clearly he was the immediate thought, and they didn't feel the need to tinker during the game, and for obvious reasons you wouldn't do that. But I'll say this, and maybe it'll be viewed like I'm being negative or whatever. I don't know that you've seen a good enough performance out of Donovan Jackson at guard to just say, like, now you go play tackle. Like I haven't seen it. So I think you could muddy the picture even a whole lot more for the offensive line, which now more than ever needs some cohesion by moving other guys around. So I think you put in Zen, you figure out a way to let Bennett Christian or maybe Luke Montgomery in that Bison role or whatever, or Austin Sareveld in that Bison role, and then you find ways to balance it that way. Because as we've already talked about, like Penn State, okay, like if you can get through that, then you have another month to figure out how to handle Michigan's defensive line. So I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to overthink it in this case. Like you got 2 weeks. Zen's confident. He had a good spring. He's clearly someone Ryan Day talked about a number of times throughout the spring and summer, and we were constantly like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about Zen. Oh yeah, Zen's here." He went in. He didn't play perfect, but who was going to in that situation? I just think that you just stick with that and you roll from there. Now, the only caveat to that, I guess, is like I think George Fitzpatrick's been pretty good when he's played for Ohio State, and that maybe there's a potential for him to be that guy instead. But I don't see putting a guard out of left tackle at this point.
I agree with your point about not shuffling up the rest of the line, which is to say, like, I don't think they'll flip Fryer. I don't think they'll move Donovan. But if I had to pick one person who I think would be the left tackle against Nebraska, I think I'd pick Austin Sareveld.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, it fits. You're not causing any other chaos.
Yeah. But George Fitzpatrick is a good name to keep in mind because, like, again, for whatever it's worth, these are second highest graded offensive linemen on PFF, and he's played 54 snaps. And he's pretty athletic, right? Like, that's the one thing.
I mean, he's a rugby player or a lacrosse player growing up. I mean, he wasn't a football guy, so he's got good feet. Is he physical enough? I can't be sure of that. We can ask him. I don't know if he's physical enough to hold up against guys like Abdul Carter for very long. But again, I don't think Zen Mahalski is either. So you're going to have help there one way or the other. So
what if you took Zen and then put George on his shoulders and they did like a little Rascals thing at left tackle?
I think you'd have to tie them together at the shoulders so that they're twice as wide, not twice as tall.
A little stuck on you situation.
Because if you just make them 12 feet tall, I don't think that's going to help against Abdul Carter.
I knew by the end of the show we'd be back to a normal Freaky Friday. We got there eventually. Hope you stuck with us for it. That was as straight laced as it comes on the podcast daily. But this improvement week number 2 is now over. Thanks for sticking with us all week long with the podcast daily and Buckeye Qs and Roosters and everything else. We appreciate you all. We hope you have a great weekend. This has been straightforward predictions on the podcast daily. He's Bill Landis. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.